The Curse of the Fire. Dancer in the heart of Zimbabwe, nestled at the edge of the great Zimbabwe ruins, lay a small, vibrant village called Chibero. The village was known for its rich traditions, its people's connection to the land, and its stunning performances during the annual Gavu Dance Festival. The most revered aspect of the festival was the fire dance, a tradition passed down through generations. It was said that the fire dancers held the power to summon the ancestors' spirits, ensuring good fortune for the coming harvest. The festival was a sacred time for the villagers. The air was thick with excitement and the sound of drums signaling the start of the ceremonies. For Chibero's people, it was a season of renewal, a time when the earth and the spirit world were closest. The elders would make offerings to the gods, and the young would showcase their skills. The fire dance was more than an art, it was a form of prayer. The dancers, moving to the rhythm of the drums, were believed to channel the power of the ancestors to keep their community safe, blessed with abundant crops, and protected from harm. In Chibero, no one could perform the fire dance like Chipo. From the time she was a little girl, Chipo had been mesmerized by the flickering flames that her elders would twirl around their bodies during the festival. Her grandmother, Gogo Rudo, a respected elder of the village, had been the one to teach her the sacred movements. Gogo would often say, "The fire is not something you control, Chipo. It is something you honor. It is the spirit of the earth, the sun, and the ancestors." Chipo's talent was undeniable. By the age of 16, she was performing the fire dance so beautifully that it was as if the flames were an extension of her body, and the village had no doubt she would be the one to carry on the tradition. But as the skills grew, so did the rumors. There were whispers about the fire's wrath, about the dangers that came with summoning it too often. Some said that the fire spirit, once angered, would destroy everything in its path. Yet Chipo was not deterred by these superstitions. She knew a connection with the fire was stronger than anyone else's. The Gavu Dance Festival was only weeks away when strange events began to unfold. The first signs were small but unsettling. Crops started failing inexplicably, and children in the village began to fall ill with strange fevers. One by one, the village elders fell into an uneasy silence. It was Rafiki, the village's oldest elder and spiritual guide, who first dared to speak up. He came to Chipo's family with a troubled look on his face. "You've been chosen to dance, my child," Rafiki said, as a voice heavy with unspoken warnings. "But there are forces at work here, forces that you may not fully understand." Chipo was confused. "What do you mean, Rafiki?" "The fire spirit that you dance with. It is not just a flame, Chipo. It is a spirit, an ancient one. And when a dancer becomes too proud, too sure of themselves, the spirit may turn. If you are not careful, it will consume you." Chipo was taken aback, but she dismissed his words as the ramblings of an old man. She had danced in front of the elders for years, and nothing bad had ever happened. She would continue. But when she spoke to her grandmother that night, Gogo Rudo's face darkened. "Chipo, my child," Gogo said softly, "there are stories. Stories I have kept hidden. Your great-grandmother danced with the fire too, long before you. She was the best, the most beautiful dancer the village had ever seen. But she grew too proud, too confident, and the fire took her." Chipo felt a chill run down her spine. "What happened to her?" "She vanished," Gogo replied. Her eyes, distant, haunted. No one saw her again. But it is said that her spirit still lingers, watching over the dancers. If you call to it too strongly, If you take too much, it will come for you as well. Chipo shook her head. That's just a story, Gogo. I'm in control. I have nothing to fear. But the unease in Gogo's eyes stayed with her. The night of the Gavu dance festival arrived. The entire village gathered at the ceremonial grounds, a large open space surrounded by massive stone walls that echoed the voices of generations past. A large fire pit had been prepared, the flames already dancing in the center. The villagers, adorned in bright, traditional clothes, stood in anticipation. As the music began, Chipo stepped forward, her movements graceful as she raised her arms, drawing the attention of the crowd. The drums pounded louder, the rhythms growing faster and more intense. With each beat, Chipo could feel the pulse of the earth beneath her feet. It was as if the fire was calling to her, urging her to begin. The flames, now swirling and dancing around her, seemed to move with a life of their own, responding to her every gesture. It was a beautiful, mesmerizing spectacle, the flames rising and falling in time with her graceful movements. As she continued to dance, Chipo felt a rush of power. The fire seemed to embrace her, flowing through her veins, wrapping her in its heat. The crowd gasped and cheered, but Chipo's focus remained solely on the flames. Her body moved effortlessly, the fire twisting around her like a second skin. Then something strange happened. The flames, once obedient and graceful, began to shift and twist violently. The heat grew unbearable. Chipo's breath became shallow, and the rhythm of the drums seemed to slow. A sharp pain shot through her chest, and she faltered for a moment, her balance disrupted by the heat. But she refused to stop. She pushed forward, calling out to the fire, urging it to obey her. The flames grew higher, their heat scorching the air, making the crowd back away in fear. But Chipo did not notice. Her heart pounded in her chest as the fire burned hotter. Her eyes were wild, consumed by the desire to control it, to prove that she was stronger than the flames. She was not just a dancer, she was the master of fire itself. Then, suddenly, the fire exploded in a burst of heat. The crowd gasped as the flames shot high into the air, almost as if they had a mind of their own. Chipo stumbled back, the heat unbearable. Her heart raced as she looked at the villagers' frightened faces. The fire had never done this before. In the chaos, the ground beneath Chipo's feet seemed to tremble. She felt a presence, a powerful, oppressive force. It was as if the spirit of the fire itself was angry, its flames scorching everything in its path. The air grew thick with smoke, and Chipo's vision blurred. She could hear whispers, voices calling her name, but they were not of the living. She had lost control. Panicking, she rushed away from the fire, but the flames followed her, a force she could no longer control. Rafiki stepped forward, chanting in a language Chipo couldn't understand. The fire faltered for a moment, but it was clear that something was wrong. Chipo collapsed to her knees, trembling. Stop! The fire will not be tamed by force, Rafiki shouted. You must listen to the spirits. You have angered them. But Chipo could barely hear him over the roar of the flames. In a final, desperate act, she called out to the spirits, Please, I did not mean to anger you. I only wanted to honor you. For a moment, everything went still. The fire calmed, its flames dimming as if considering her plea. But then, from the smoke, a shadowy figure emerged, an ancient spirit cloaked in flame. Its eyes burned with an intense fury. You have summoned me, mortal. The spirit's voice boomed, echoing through the night. And now you will pay for your pride. Chibo's heart sank as she realized the true cost of her actions. The spirit had come not to bless her, but to claim her. She had unknowingly invoked the curse of her ancestors. It was too late. In that moment, Rafiki stepped forward, holding a ceremonial staff. He began to chant, his voice steady despite the chaos. Slowly, the spirit receded, its flames flickering and retreating into the air. Chipo collapsed in exhaustion, her body drained. The next morning, Chipo awoke in her family's hut, the sun rising over the village. The fire had been extinguished, the festival had ended in a whisper, and the villagers had returned to their homes, shaken by the events of the night. Chipo too was changed. The fire had not only burned her body, but had scarred her soul. She knew now that the flames could never be fully controlled and that some spirits were best left undisturbed. Chipo disappeared from Chibero shortly after that night. She never danced again. Some say that she lives quietly in a distant village, a humble woman with her head bowed in regret. Others believe that the fire spirit still follows her, watching, waiting. But the memory of a dance lingers in Chibero, a reminder that some things, some traditions carry a cost far greater than the beauty of the flames. And so the fire dance lives on in Chibero, but now it is performed with reverence, caution, and respect for the forces that shape the land. The elders remind the dancers every year that the fire is not to be taken lightly. The spirit of the flame watches, waiting for those who dare to call it too fiercely, a silent guardian of the balance between the living and the ancestors.